So it's interesting that we've got such a big group of people here tonight. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in cannabinoids or the derivatives of marijuana and how they relate to multiple sclerosis. I would have to say that this has probably been one of the most challenging talks that I've put together, because there's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of conflicting information, and there's a lot of misinformation. I will say that as much as I know about this topic, I'm still learning. There may be people in the audience who are going to contribute their thoughts on things, because I think a lot of us, as it relates to this topic, are, again, we're sort of learning as we go. So let's start with the marijuana plant itself. So this plant has been around for tens of thousands of years. It probably originated as an indigenous species in Asia. When we look back through time, you'll see references to an emperor of China in 2700 BC using marijuana for its medicinal properties. Very debatable whether this Chinese emperor actually existed. I found so even on the DEA's website, they list this Chinese emperor, and then other historians say, nah, the guy never existed. The drug itself, the plant itself, was used clearly in ancient China. You can find references to marijuana use in the Middle East, in the Roman Empire, throughout Europe. It's been around for a long, long time. It's a complicated plant. There are over 400 active compounds, 480 active compounds in cannabis species. Of these, the ones that most people are interested in are the cannabinoids. There are 66 active cannabinoids, and I listed the different groups here of the types of cannabinoids. We're going to give them the initial CBG, CBC, cannabidiol, which is one that we're interested in. THC is one that most people have heard of. CBDL and CBN, and then there are a whole host of others out there. So the ones that have probably, that most people are familiar with, are the ones that get you high or have psychoactive properties. And these are primarily THC, CBN, and CBDL. The other two classes that do not have psychoactive properties are CBC and CBD, which we're going to spend some time talking about. And this is your trivia question for the night. For extra credit, who can tell me what the character's name was, what movie it was, and who the actor is? Okay, we got Sean Penn. Spicoli. Very good. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. You guys are too good. So Spicoli's kind of sad here because he's got non-psychoactive cannabinoids. So how are cannabis products administered? I think most people, when they think of marijuana products, they think of smoking them. They can also be vaporized. There are sublingual oils that can either be just used as a dropper or as a spray. There are topical oils, and then there are also just consumable forms, whether it's in brownies or other foods or candies. Where it starts getting a little bit confusing is that there are two different species of cannabis out there. Traditionally, we thought of cannabis indica and cannabis sativa. Cannabis indica was traditionally thought of as having a lot of THC relative to the CBD in the plant, whereas cannabis sativa was felt to have a higher CBD to THC ratio. The problem with that sort of differentiation is there's been so much crossbreeding and so much hybridization over the years that those distinctions really don't hold up anymore. For instance, if you went to some of the dispensaries in California, you can find cannabis sativa products out there that are very, very high in CBD and very, very low in the THC ratio, and you can find sativa products that are the exact opposite. So another way of thinking about sort of the delineation in cannabis products is between the term marijuana and hemp. Most of these two, marijuana and hemp, in the modern world are both derivations of cannabis sativa. Hemp is sometimes referred to as a subspecies of cannabis sativa. They'll put an L after it to designate it as the hemp product. Traditionally, we think of hemp as being used, the fibrous parts of hemp as being used for rope, for paper, for fabric, sometimes made into food products. In 2011, researchers in British Columbia discovered a single gene difference when you looked at the hemp versus the marijuana end of the cultivation chain, showing that this single gene accounted for an enzyme difference that led to marijuana producing more of the THC type cannabinoids and hemp producing more of the cannabidiol cannabinoids. Just a few other terminologies out there. So when we say marijuana, we generally referring to the plant, the leafy part, the flower part of the plant. Hash or hashish, if you look at the flower, there are little hairs on it that are called trichromes. Those hairs are very rich in the resins of the plant, typically very high in THC, and if those are pressed down into a sort of a block, that's what hash is. So cannabis has a very interesting history in the United States. In the early colonial America, the Virginia Assembly actually required landowning farmers to grow hemp. It was part of the colonial statutes at that time. In the 1800s in the United States, domestic cannabis production was just flourishing. It was used marijuana-based products were used very commonly, and a number of over-the-counter remedies for a variety of ailments. Things started getting interesting in the early 1900s. In 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act was passed, and this required that over-the-counter products that contained marijuana be labeled as having such. 1910 to 1930, the Mexican Revolution has ended. In the southwestern part of the United States, we have a large number of Mexican immigrants coming in, and they brought with them a fairly high amount of recreational marijuana use. There was a fairly strong backlash with a fair degree of racist overtones to it, and suddenly marijuana started to become viewed as something that was associated with these brown-skinned Mexican immigrants, and it was a bad thing. And so there started to be a lot of concern about the marijuana menace. This led in 1930 to the formation of a federal bureau, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, created by a man named Harry Anslinger. This guy was very, very anti-marijuana. In 1936, a propaganda film, Reefer Madness. How many have ever seen if you YouTube it, it's kind of funny. This is the movie poster for Reefer Madness. It was for adults only. Marijuana was declared public enemy #1. Women cry for it and men die for it. Not to be outdone, Hallmark came out with their own movie, The Devil's Weed, also for adults only, exposing the tragic truth of the marijuana menace in the United States. And again, you can also YouTube that one. Taking it a step further, the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, and this was largely sort of the brainchild of Harry Anslinger, this didn't outlaw marijuana products, but it placed a heavy tax on any marijuana or hemp sales. You had to have a tax stamp for any transactions that involved these. Interestingly, one of the major opponents to this federal law was the American Medical Association. The American Medical Association, on behalf of doctors who were using marijuana-based products, said this is a bad deal for doctors and for patients, and they really fought against it, and they lost. There's an interesting conspiracy theory that part of the impetus for the Marijuana Tax Act may have been two very wealthy families at that time. The Hearst family, who was a major newspaper empire, the newspaper at that time, the Hearst family owned a lot of stock in wood-based pulp. Newspaper precursor. The DuPont family had just come up with nylon for making rope. Hemp was a competitor for those two products, and it's been theorized that part of Congress's motivation for passing the Marijuana Tax Act may have actually been financial to help out these two very wealthy families. So that's some of our past history. Where are we at right now? So what we're going to look at as we go forward is, what does the science say about the use of cannabinoids in multiple sclerosis? What are the side effects of cannabinoids, and what does the law say about this? So interestingly, in the past couple of decades, it has been discovered that humans have an endocannabinoid system. We have cannabinoid receptors throughout the brain and the spinal cord. And interestingly, every cell in the immune system that's been looked at has a cannabinoid receptor. Humans make endogenous cannabinoids. These are chemicals, two of which have been identified, that work at these receptors and have effects like the cannabinoids found in the plant material itself. If you do a scientific literature search of the immune effects of cannabinoids in humans, it's a very long list. So the cannabinoids have effects on antibody production, they have effects on CD4 cells in the human immune system, CD4 cells, chemical messengers in the immune system called cytokines can be affected. And the end result is that cannabinoids have anti-inflammatory effects in the human immune system. So what does the American Academy of Neurology say about cannabinoids? Frequently what bodies like the Academy of Neurology will do is they'll look at the bulk of the science and they'll come out with what they call a position paper. Well, they'll say, well, based upon the scientific evidence, we feel that X, Y, and Z is applicable to whatever treatment we're looking at. So the Academy of Neurology has said that there is strong evidence that cannabinoid extracts made from pure CBD can help lessen patients' reported spasticity symptoms in short-term studies. There was moderate evidence that THC pills and oral spray probably help lessen patients' reported symptoms of spasticity in short-term studies and probably help lessen the spasms or cramp-like pain. What's interesting is when they looked at objective measures of spasticity, we typically use something called the Ashworth scale in research. They couldn't show that the cannabinoids actually affected the Ashworth scale. So you had this interesting sort of paradox where people reported feeling better even when they were using products that didn't have any THC. So they were using a pure CBD product, which doesn't make people high, it doesn't make you euphoric, doesn't make you giddy. People reported feeling less pain, less spasticity. But when doctors or other researchers tried to measure it with the Ashworth scale, they couldn't find the objective evidence of it. So it may mean that maybe we're just not measuring the right thing with the Ashworth scale. They also found that there was strong evidence that cannabinoid extract pills help lessen central pain or central neuropathic pain. This would be burning, hypersensitivity, hypersensitivity to touch. There was moderate evidence that showed that the oral spray helped lessen frequent urination. One of the things that the cannabinoid extracts did not do is help with tremors or sort of what we call dysmetria or incoordination of movement. So it looks like the evidence is good that cannabinoids can help certain symptoms of multiple sclerosis, primarily spasticity/spasms, central neuropathic pain, maybe urinary frequency and urgency. If in other research it looks like cannabinoids have anti-inflammatory or other immune effects, does that mean that we could use cannabinoids as disease-modifying therapies? So would cannabinoids have effects like our traditional copaxones and beta-serons and albagios and all of those drugs? So even though the laboratory research would suggest that there is this anti-inflammatory effect in the immune system, to date, no research has shown that the cannabinoids have an effect on relapse rates, progression of disability, or new MRI lesions. The research is ongoing. I don't think it's a completely settled subject, but at least at this point, there is no evidence that we could use cannabinoids as a disease-modifying therapy, so they probably fit best in that realm of symptomatic management. So if we're thinking of cannabinoids as a treatment for symptoms of MS, you know as good consumers of healthcare, anytime we talk about what's good about a particular treatment, we need to talk about what's potentially bad. So what are the potential side effects of cannabinoids in multiple sclerosis? This survey looked at just the broad group of people using cannabinoids. The hard thing about a lot of these surveys is they're not very specific as to what form people were using. Are they smoking it, eating it, vaping it, using an oil? Is it a CBD product? Is it a THC product? So that's one of the challenges of a lot of the data that you look at out there. But taken as a whole, what this survey showed is that about half of people experienced side effects. The majority of those were mild. There were things like red eyes, dry mouth, the munchies, people wanted to eat too much, or they got sleepy with it. 2% of people reported severe side effects. A lot of the effects that we think of in the brain are probably more related to THC than CBD. So the euphoria that some people get, the happy feeling, unfortunately the paranoid feeling that some people get are probably more related to THC. One of the side effects that some people report with marijuana or cannabinoid products is this alteration of sense of time. People will feel like time has drastically slowed down, problems with visual perception. When we think about cannabinoids as symptomatic management, I think it's important to think about how these products might affect your ability to carry out activities of daily living. So we wouldn't want to see people on a product that would alter their sense of time or depth perception getting behind the wheel of a car. So I think we need to, just like we wouldn't want to see someone on baclofen who is ready to nod off at any moment, or Xanaflex, tizanidine, that's ready to nod off at any moment. So we have to think about the potential side effects in addition to the potential good. A side effect that's been more recently reported that I really wasn't aware of until about a year ago is called the cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And if you talk to emergency department healthcare providers, they're seeing this more and more as cannabinoid use has increased throughout the United States. And it's somewhat paradoxical. Hyperemesis means you're vomiting and you are doing a lot of it. So we traditionally think of cannabinoids as having anti-nausea properties, but paradoxically in some people with chronic use of cannabinoid products, they can actually have cycles of extreme nausea and vomiting and end up in the emergency room with that. So something to be aware of. So this was an interesting panel that was put together by one of the administrators from the FDA back in the spring of 2016. And the purpose of this meeting was to consider whether marijuana would be moved from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule II drug. Schedule I drugs are things like heroin and cocaine that are felt to have high addictive potential, high abuse potential, and no legitimate medical rationale for using them. That's where marijuana is placed right now. So these are the current laws state by state. And what you can see is that it's hard to read the bottom of this, but this is a patchwork of state laws, many of which seem to contradict the federal law. So what the red slashed areas, so Washington, Oregon, and Colorado, Alaska, have probably the most liberal laws. So these are areas where marijuana has been legalized, if you will, for both recreational and medical use. The next step down would be an area where like California or Nevada, where it's decriminalized. So it's not like the state is saying, okay, recreational use is completely fine. They're just not going to throw you in jail for it. And they allow some degree of medical use. The majority of states in the United States, 42 states to be exact, have some sort of law allowing some use of cannabinoid products. Only eight states have nothing on the books. These are the white states that you see on the map. A lot of states are green, like Georgia. And these are states that allow CBD oil in some form. And we'll as we move on, we'll talk a lot about Georgia's laws in specific and what they mean to a person with multiple sclerosis. But again, we said that federally, marijuana is still classified as a Schedule I drug, meaning that as far as the FDA is concerned and the DEA are concerned, there's a high potential for abuse, there's no currently accepted medical use, and there's a lack of accepted safety for use under medical supervision. It was hoped that, again, that they would move it out of that category. So what are the forms of cannabinoids that the FDA has signed off on in the United States? There is Marinol or Dronabinol. Marinol is over on your left-hand side. So this is a tablet of a synthetic THC that is FDA approved for nausea in cancer patients. It's also used frequently in HIV, where people have wasting away, poor appetites to try to stimulate their appetite. We have used this as a treatment for spasticity and pain in multiple sclerosis. Our challenge in using Marinol in multiple sclerosis is it's not FDA approved for MS, and it's very expensive. It's about $1,000 a month. And if you want to sort of, get an insurance company's attention, use something that's not FDA approved and it's expensive, and you can almost guarantee that they're going to say no. So we get a lot of no's on Marinol. There's Sesamet, which is another synthetic cannabinoid product, which is approved for nausea and neuropathic pain. In some places globally, they have a product called Sativex. Sativex is approved in Canada, in Great Britain, and in Spain. Those are the only places I could find. There may be others. It was developed by GW Pharmaceuticals in the UK. It is a cannabis extract. It is from the plant itself. It is not a synthetic. And it is a 1-to-1 ratio of THC to CBD used as a sublingual spray. It's approved for spasticity use in those countries. It is reportedly going to undergo testing here in the United States for spasticity related to multiple sclerosis. So what was the end result of that April 2016 meeting? The FDA said no. They did not relabel marijuana as a Schedule II drug. They left it as a Schedule I drug, but they sort of held out a little bit of an olive branch and said, but we encourage more research. It was a pretty big disappointment for people that were hoping it would be moved out of that Schedule I. What they did do that I think was a good thing is both in 2015 and 2016, the FDA sent out warning letters to scam companies that were making fake CBD oil products. So if if you're from Atlanta, you know that you could probably go down to Little 5 Points where all the funky young people are at, and you can go to one of the head shops, and you can buy something that's labeled as CBD oil, and it's going to cost you $30 or $40, and it's mostly sunflower oil. There is no CBD whatsoever in that, and that's what the FDA wanted to shut down. They at least wanted to say, if you're going to claim that there's CBD oil in that bottle, there better be CBD oil in that bottle. And they sent out letters to at least 20 different companies who are making a sham product. So this is an important, so when we think about using CBD oil, this is an important law to know about. So we're going to talk about some of the companies that are legitimate around the United States that manufacture a CBD oil. How are they allowed to do that? They're allowed to do that through the 2014 Industrial Farm Bill Act. And what the Farm Bill Act did is it exempted hemp-based products where CBD oil can be produced from the Controlled Substances Act. So what they did is they basically handed it to the states, and they said, okay, Georgia, Kentucky, Texas, if your Department of Agriculture can verify that this farmer is growing legitimate hemp and can produce safe, laboratory-tested CBD oil, we're gonna let you manufacture that. You can drop it in the U.S. mail and send it around the United States, and it's not going to fall under the jurisdiction of the Controlled Substances Act. That was all well and good until December of 2016, when the DEA had a memo that didn't get a lot of attention unless you were one of these companies that manufactures CBD oil. Because what this memo that the DEA put out said is that they thought that any CBD oil, whether it comes from hemp, marijuana, anything, it didn't matter, that this was still illegal. We don't know what to do with that. Most of the companies that manufacture CBD oils have said it's in direct contradiction to a congressionally passed act, the Farm Bill Act. And so it looks like right now everyone's kind of ignoring that and just telling the DEA directly or indirectly, we think you guys have it wrong. All of these companies that manufacture CBD oil products are doing it in the complete light of day. They're not hidden. You can go on the internet and we'll talk about some of these companies. So I think that this was a mistake on the part of the DEA. None of our patients that are using CBD oil have had any problem getting it. Thank you guys. Chris, do you want to say a few words? Yep.
Thank you so much.